Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/196 and email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109 and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello to everybody in the YouTubes. Hello to everybody on the internets and elsewhere. We are live, baby, live for episode number 196 of the Pedalshift Project. Thank you so much for joining. I am Tim Mooney, as I have told all the folks in the YouTube chat room prior to this recording here. Thanks so much for joining. Really excited to be here. We're 4 episodes away from episode number 200. This is episode number 196, math. And I am really excited to be here. Multi-pronged show tonight. As I sit here recording this, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Kessel Run. I've got a top 10 takeaways, kind of put that tour to bed. And while we put one tour to bed, we are going to announce a brand new one. I am announcing the March 2020 Spring Tour. Very, very excited. The final piece of the puzzle got locked into place a mere few hours ago. So I am super ready to talk about it right now here tonight on the live show. And that, of course, is going to be a tour next month, which is really exciting. Also, we're going to do a little bit of talking about what episode number 200 is going to look like, as we are a mere 4-ish. What is it, 4 episodes, or are we 5? Do you count this one or not? In any event, episode number 200, I'll tell you all about what's going to be happening with that. All right, so first up on the show is the housekeeping segment, and I've got a couple of things to mention. I think both of them I've already mentioned before, but a reminder that I'm going to be presenting at the National Bike Summit's Active Transportation Leadership Retreat on March 14th. If you are at the National Bike Summit and you are with one of the state organizations that do the advocacy work, that means that you might have to suffer through a session that I am teaching about advocacy, the law, and bicycle advocates. So congratulations, I guess. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to be teaching at that. This is kind of the first time I'm taking my lawyering stuff and moving it into the bicycle advocacy space. So it's going to be a lot of fun. That'll be on March 14th. I am still toying with the idea of maybe doing a meetup for folks who are coming to the National Bike Summit for non-weekendy kind of things. The Active Transportation Leadership Retreat is a smaller convening. I might be able to put something together, or might try to get at least a few friends of the show together. So if you are coming to the National Bike Summit, shoot me an email at pedalshift@pedalshift.net. If there's sort of a critical mass and there's interest, then maybe we'll all get together and grab a fine District of Columbia beer someplace, or the beverage of your choice someplace, and we can kind of hang out in a little mini meet up. For those of you who have been following along, another bit of housekeeping to the Kessel Run, you noted for the record that I promised that I would not put too much Star Wars stuff into the Kessel Run bike tour segments. I think I succeeded with that, with the possible exception of me talking about the lightsaber a few times, but that was an interesting element to the trip that I will be talking about a little bit later in the show as well. I do have a ton of audio from the Star Wars stuff of the day, so I am still hoping to maybe kind of pull that together. So if you are amongst the few in the Venn diagram that I reside in, where you're a Star Wars fan and you're into bicycle touring and you want to hear the Star Wars stuff, I am still planning on pulling all of that together. It might take me a few more weeks, but look for that maybe sometime in March, and I will let folks know where that lives. It's not going to end up in the feed. It'll be something where you can just go to a page someplace on the website and give it a listen there. I had literally no idea how much time I spent recording, but I recorded a lot, so it might be longer than any of the episodes of the bike touring stuff. So who knows? It just all depends on how good it sounds. I have no idea. I haven't listened to it yet, so we'll have to get to that, because bike touring came first. Trust me. All right, folks, next up on the show is the Kessel Run Wrap-Up, a top 10 list. This is in no particular order, and in fact, I'm not even going to do it as a countdown. I'm going to do it from number 1 through number 10. So let's get started here with number 1, and that is Central Florida doesn't expect a bicycle tour, but I found it to be better cycling than its reputation. When I first started thinking about doing a bike tour in Florida last year, actually even the year before that, it was met with a bit of skepticism amongst the folks that I talked to. Florida does not have an excellent reputation as a bicycling state. Now, I know that there's some folks that are in the listenership that are from Florida, some folks that have bike toured pretty extensively in Florida. There's definitely good bones there. There's good places for it. But generally speaking, as a bicycling state, especially when you're not on some of the traffic separated trails, which are excellent, the ones that I've been on, and I've seen there's a great big network of more of them. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think that Florida gets a bit of a rap for being not very bicycle friendly. And I think that really depends on where you're at. In my experience now, having done this twice and having done slightly different variations of the route between Orlando and Tampa in particular now 2 years in a row, I think that what I'd say is that this part of Florida is not built technically for bicycles or bicycle touring, but the shoulders are there, the sidewalks are there, and if you are a comfortable urban rider, I think that you can get away with having a pretty nice time, as I have the last couple of years. It's not the same as some of the well-trodden routes out there, the Pacific Coast, the Erie Canal, the C&O, all these other places, especially because you're in and about traffic quite a bit. But I have to say, even though they're not really expecting you to be there, I think it's a pretty decent place to ride a bike. And what I also have found is that when you're doing it the way that I've been doing the last couple of years and not doing any camping, there's some relatively inexpensive lodging opportunities, by U.S. adjusted standards. And you know what? It's pretty great. So I would have to say this is not what I would call a beginner's level tour by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not even sure it's the tour for everyone. But I mean, what tour is for everyone? I would just say I've really rather kind of enjoyed my experiences cycling in Central Florida. They don't expect you to be there, but it turns out, it's pretty good. So that's number one. Number two, urban riding is great training for bicycle touring amongst motorized vehicles. File this under duh. I feel like I need to make a bumper sticker, a Pedalshift bumper sticker or a t-shirt that says file under duh, because I feel like I say that every other episode. I am very used to riding amongst cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, little e-scooters, etc., here in the District of Columbia. And I think that trains you really well for being used to being amongst motorized vehicles, which I think that if you're going to be doing any touring on roads of note where you're not going to have a very specified protected bicycle lane, which is frankly a lot of bicycle touring, urban riding is really good training for all of that. I don't know if it's good that I get used to having vehicles within 18 inches to 2 feet away from me, buzzing by at a speed that's probably faster than safe. But I kind of get to the point. Yeah, I guess when you're exposed, they call it, I guess in psychology and stuff, exposure therapy. If you're just exposed to something that's dangerous or off-putting for a while, eventually you get used to it. It's sort of the idea in a whole bunch of different places. So I feel like that as long as you are paying attention to yourself and paying attention to your safety, getting desensitized to having lots of motorized vehicles around you, it's actually a pretty good thing from a bicycle touring perspective. Now, I know a lot of folks would probably disagree with that. They don't like riding amongst cars and whatnot. That's all fine. I think I'm just really speaking from my experience and what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling when I ride. But very frequently, I'll sit down and notice, oh wow, there's just a lot of cars going around me and I don't have a shoulder, and yet I feel as safe here in this scenario as I do on a trail with no motorized vehicles at all. It's kind of funny that that's the case, but it seems to be that. And I the only thing I can think of is I'm used to being amongst motorized vehicles, and I've been extremely fortunate that I've never had an incident before. So maybe that's an important piece of it too. But urban riding, great training for bicycle touring amongst motorized vehicles. Number 3, Disney World and airports, not super bike friendly unless they are. I talked about with this particular tour that I was absolutely not going to take my life into my own hands and bicycle on Disney World property. And my decision was reinforced when I was there. When you are there on that large campus property, it's basically all private roads that are effectively freeways with no shoulders whatsoever. It's meant exclusively for motorized vehicles, and I just don't think it would be a very safe place to bicycle. In fact, I think, and I believe I may have mentioned this, I'm not sure if I wouldn't get pulled over by Disney security if I was there on a bicycle. I just don't think it's allowed. I'd be really curious to test that out if I Well, if I wasn't crazy, or if I was crazy. Anyways, point being, I don't think I ever want to do that. The other interesting experience that I had, and you heard about this at the end of part 2, was the approach to Tampa International Airport. And I was really excited by the fact that I did, in fact, ride to the airport as far as one could. And it was to one of the train terminals, which is what I would have had to have done anyways. I guess it would have been really cool if I could have ridden my bicycle all the way up to basically the door where I could walk in. But I don't think the airport is built like that anyways. I think that when you get dropped off, you get dropped off at a remote spot anyways. But I will have to say that it was a very strange setup. Like many big airports, things go from local roads to immediately a 4-lane highway really quickly. But I think I was fortunate that the way that the city of Tampa sort of interfaces with the airport, there was a way to hop on a sidewalk when things got really, really busy. And I had a picture on Instagram and all the socials that showed how much of a airporty entrance I was in, but I was on a sidewalk at that point, and I was able to ride right up to a spot where there was, I believe, one wavy bike staple, and clearly folks that worked at the airport that chose to bicycle, that's where they would go. So I sort of half stumbled upon it. So I would say that, places that aren't super bike friendly, it's kind of a bummer because I do like to use my bike as much as I can. But it is nice to be able to discover getting to that the furthest point possible, and bicycling to and from an airport is, I think, really fun. I feel really fortunate because last year I didn't try this, and I kind of regret that I didn't explore it a little bit further. If you recall, last year's Florida tour, I started in Tampa and went from west to east, and I got a lift. I got picked up by a rideshare, and I got dropped off at a local park. I didn't need to do that, as it turns out. I could have ridden straight from the airport. So I think that the lesson for me is, yeah, it may look like that things aren't exactly great for bicycling from airports, but double check. You never know. I'm also heartened, and I mentioned this in the first episode, the first part of the Kessel Run, that Tampa International Airport is about to get, by the League of American Cyclists, a big award, essentially, for being the best airport in the country for bicycle access, which is going to be a neat trick because I've been to some airports that have some pretty good access. So it'll be interesting to see what that trail looks like. And I wonder if it's just an extension, essentially, of what I was on before. So that was number 3. Number 4, ride with GPS. Real big hat tip to these folks. Ride with GPS is a fantastic tool for riding in quote-unquote new to me places, but spending some time with Google Street View can demystify spots that look gnarly on a map. That's really long, but that's basically what it is. I have talked about this before, but I think it's worth mentioning as part of the takeaways here for the Kessel Run, that when you do, if you are into doing any nominal amount of prep for tours, like I do, I'm kind of a prepare guy. I know that there's lots of folks who'd like to just kind of point their bikes and go. But for those of you who like to do a little bit of preparation, when you're in an unfamiliar place, especially the type of place where I was cycling on this tour, where, it's sort of like you want to find the safest, best route through areas that aren't necessarily built for bicycling. I like to combine Ride with GPS, which hooks into, TrailLink plus Google Maps for bicycle routing, plus all of the crowdsourced data for bicycle routes that are created. And you combine that, once it lays down a track for you, I'll take a look at Google Street View, and I'll make adjustments in Ride with GPS. If you're kind of the premium or plus member, you can do that. And I think that works out really well. So in parts that look a little bit gnarly on a map, then I'll drop into Google Street View, see what it looks like. Sometimes there'll be a sidewalk. Sometimes there'll be an actual bike lane. Sometimes it'll be like, this does not look really good. This is crossing a major highway and the crossing is just not very good, the overpass or the underpass. And so I'll look for a different spot. That's been really helpful for me. I think those two tools together are really powerful things, and I tend to use them an awful lot. In areas of the country or areas, eventually of the world when I ride, that don't have good established routes, this is my tool of choice for kind of mapping out things. So Ride with GPS plus Google Street View. And Ride with GPS is just one of the many tools. I know that there's a lot of folks who use different mapping techniques and different mapping tools, but that's the one I like. I think those folks do a good job and have a good product. So number 5, I don't think I'll stick with just one style of touring, and Florida proves why. I think that from a bike touring perspective, I have never found that just one style has ever grabbed me more than another. And in fact, I like having a diversity of riding styles. And there are times when I want to be alone and I want to be out in the wilderness and I want to be on a trail that goes to nowhere. And then there are times when it's sort of like, you know what? I kind of want to be in civilization. And sometimes it's a time when I want a little bit of everything. And that's why I think the Florida rides have shown me that I don't think I'm ever going to become just a pure bike packer or a pure road tourist or a pure trail rider. I kind of like it all. And I think that I want to make sure that I continue to do it all every single year. I don't think there's ever going to be a year when I'm going to say, hey, 2021 is the year of bike packing. I think that I just like all of these different modes and modalities a lot. I especially like the fact that I can tour on the Brompton, and the Brompton has, you know, some limitations to it in terms of the surfaces that it can handle. I suppose I could take it out on a trail like the C&O, but it just doesn't, that's not what it's best built for. It's built more for road touring and for getting to places where I'm really traveling remotely with it and throwing in the overhead compartment of a plane and going. And that, I think, is what I really like about it. So when I'm looking at tours where I'm going to be flying a great distance and I want to be able to kind of just be super mobile and being able to move a lot, I'll bring the Brompton and I'll make the tour fit that. But there are going to be times when I'm going to want to box up the bigger bike, the Safari, and go out in some more wilderness areas. So, and maybe even get a third bike and do some true backpacking or bike packing down the line. Point being, I think that this Florida trip and its multiple levels of surfaces and the multiple different types of riding, whether it was completely in the country to all the way into some pretty big major urban areas, I just liked that diversity, and I don't think I'm ever going to give that up. So that is number 5. Number 6, 4 seasons for the win. Look, hey, there's a lot to be said about bike touring through all 4 seasons, but I will also say, although it's been a really mild winter here in the DC area, and I've been riding quite a bit more than I normally do, I am a real big fan of not taking a season off for bicycle touring. And if that means traveling someplace for it, great. Because really, when you think about it, a lot of my tours, I end up traveling anyways to go to them, whether it's spring, summer, fall, or now winter. I do think that not taking any season off is really beneficial because I don't have a ramp up period. For a long time, before I started doing the winter tours, I found that my first tour of the spring was kind of a catch-up thing. I wasn't in the same type of bicycling shape, and it just been a while, and I kind of like the idea of maybe doing a bicycle tour every few months. That just works out really well for me, and if I can schedule it in, and because sometimes life gets busy and it's just not possible, but in the recent years I've been able to make it work, even if it's just short tours like I've been doing, couple days long, 3 days long. That works for me, and I really like that. So 4 seasons for the win. Number 6. Number 7. Ultra light does not mean ultra stupid. Okay, let me explain this. I got really lucky with the way the rain went on this tour, considering I forgot my rain pants. I think that the big takeaway for me is stop trying to win a personal bet, really, and be smarter about taking a look at a pack list, double checking it, making sure I've got everything. Had the rain shifted a few hours or had it been heavier, I would have had a really uncomfortable first day of cycling. And I think that because I forgot the rain pants, but I was also forgetting the rain pants because I was like, oh, I've got so much stuff in here, and I was just sort of rushing along and didn't really do a good job of double checking. It was always like, oh, well, I don't have room for anything in here anyway, so I'm not going to do my double check. I should have done the double check because it could have been not catastrophic because I knew that the weather wasn't going to be that bad, but it really would have made things a little less fun, quite frankly, had I gotten caught in some real downpours. So I have to say that when everything is all said and done, don't just assume that everything is in your bags like I did. I made a pretty big mistake from my perspective, and I was lucky that it was just rain pants that I forgot. It could have been a lot worse if I forgot something more critical. Luckily, this was a pretty charmed ride, so I was fortunate, but at the same time, fortune does not always smile on my bike tours, as you well know if you have paid any attention to the show. So many of my tours have been scuttled. So many of my tours I've called short because of mechanicals or other types of things. It happens. But this one I got a little bit lucky, and it would have been a comfort issue, not I can't go anyplace kind of issue. But ultralight does not mean ultra stupid. Make sure you check things. That was number 7. Number 8, off-road opportunity in Florida appears to be abundant. This has to do with the trails. For folks that are members of the Rails to Trails organization, I think it's Rail Link is the name of their mapping system. Take a gander at Florida and look at all of the trails. Some of them go for quite a long distance. The interesting thing about it is there's no method to the madness with it. There are a lot of trails that are just really long, and then they just sort of begin and end, and they don't really kind of link together. There is a movement to link a bunch of these trails together in Central Florida, and that was sort of the idea behind last year's tour. I'm thinking for my 2021 tour, as I mentioned, that I'm going to try to maybe do something a little bit different and maybe see if I can't link some of these trails together, not unlike how I did last spring's ride. Last spring, of course, as you may recall, I rode from DC to Cincinnati, and I was able to link 3 very major trails together. The C&O, which leads right into the Gap, didn't have to do a lot of work there. But linking the Gap, the end of the Gap in Pittsburgh, to the somewhere on the Ohio to Erie Trail, and that helped get me to Cincinnati without a problem. And doing the linkage was a lot of fun for me. I think Florida is a little more complicated, and there's more smaller trails to link together, but I'm interested and intrigued to maybe come up with a multi-day trip that's mostly on these trails. I really enjoyed the Van Fleet Trail, and then the extension of that trail, it has a different name, and it's on one of the pictures, and I of course forgot to write it down, and I've already forgotten about it. But there are a lot of really interesting small trails that are in really great quality. They're all paved, and they're all over the state of Florida. And I think it's something that I'd really like to give a shot at doing sometime perhaps next year. So lots of off-road opportunity in Florida, and I'm looking forward to giving it a shot. So that is number 8. Number 9, Bromptons. Bromptons are great, and they require less maintenance, but again, here's another theme. I got really lucky on the seat post situation. So 2 things ended up happening, one of which I mentioned on the show. The other thing actually happened afterwards, and I really want to mention here too. Both of them had to do with the seat post for the Brompton, and also they really would have created a major problem had they happened while I was riding or during the actual tour itself. So first thing that happened was that, and I mentioned this, the seat clamp broke on me. Now, luckily, I have a local bike shop here in town that works on Bromptons exclusively. They had the part. I was able to get it, and everything was cool. If this had happened, which it very easily could have, this happened actually on my way home, and it happened after I had adjusted the saddle or the seat post up and locked it into place, then it broke. So I was able to ride on it without a problem. But if that had happened in a way where I needed to fold the bike, or I needed to do something with it, I was in an airport or whatever, I would have been straight hosed, because what I don't carry with me typically in my normal Brompton touring kit is a crescent wrench. And a crescent wrench, I could have loosened the bolt on the other side of the seat post clamp and then collapsed it, and everything would have been just fine. In fact, that was how I was able to ride it to the local bike shop to go get the fix. But I didn't have it with me when that happened, and as it turned out, I was not planning on bringing it with me to Florida. Okay, so I learned my lesson there. I brought that little adjustable crescent wrench, which I, of course, didn't need to use. Then something funny happened. When I got back, there is a little part. You can see for folks who are in the video, I am pointing to the extended seat post, which holds the saddle, and you can actually take that seat post out. That's really helpful for when you're going to the airport, because you can take the entire saddle and that upper seat post out. One thing that is interesting, there's a small screw in there that basically helps to guide it through. I have no idea why it's there, but it's fantastic UK engineering. That got loose after I got home, and I found that I could not get the seat post back into the bicycle again. And there was no tool that I had that was part of the Brompton kit, the Brompton toolkit, which is fascinating and cool and great, except there was nothing in there that would have been helpful with that. I really needed a set of needle nose pliers or my multi-tool, which also has effectively a needle nose plier on it, in order to be able to get it in there. And it took some doing, and my eyesight, not as good as it's been in the past. I'm of that age now where I have to kind of hold things away from me. It was really difficult to kind of get that all figured out. And I needed to have light, and I needed to be in a place that wasn't, say, like the side of the road. Had that happened while I was on tour, I did not have anything in my kit with me that would have helped to have fixed that. So I could have been straight hosed if I had pulled the saddle out and thought, oh, well, I'll take it with it. Let's say if I had locked it up. I did have my little lock with me, but didn't want to expose my Brooks saddle. I've done this before. I would just undo that and take the saddle in with me. When I got back, had this happened when I was on tour, I would not have been able to get the saddle back on the bicycle, and I would have had a bit of trouble trying to get it in, which would have been a problem because, as you're probably all well aware, it's hard to ride a bicycle without a saddle. So my takeaway here is that I need to have a toolkit with me that allows for all of the other little itty bitty parts that are on the Brompton that cannot be serviced with the Brompton toolkit. I think I've been very fortunate up till now, and I've been fortunate in the last couple of iterations where there have been problems with my bicycle, that I've been in a place where I've been able to address it, and it hasn't been the field. And I need to be able to handle just about anything in the field, even with a Brompton. It is, all of that being said, a remarkable bike for how little maintenance it requires. It really is quite amazing how just reliable it is. Internal hubs, the whole 9 yards. It's really great. I don't think I've ever had to replace the brake pads yet, which is kind of crazy considering how many miles have been on it. So it's pretty great. But I do have to say, I gotta be prepared for eventualities that are outside of that itty bitty little kit that fits within the tubes itself. So that's number 9. Finally, number 10 here of the takeaways. Number 10 of 10. Yes, you can absolutely ride with a lightsaber on your rear rack. And folks in the chat room, you've already seen this. Folks who are on the podcast, yes, you get to hear. Oh, maybe I'll just bring it over because it's important to hear this because it does make sounds. Ready? 1, 2, 3. It's pretty cool. It is pretty cool. Yeah, and it made it. Even the sound off quality is pretty fun with this. Forgive me for staying away from the mic there. It was a weird little souvenir to bring back. It was something that I wasn't 100% sure I was going to get. And then when I was there and had the opportunity, it was fun. It was cool. And it is kind of funny how having something that just is utterly ridiculous and ridiculously shaped and sized. It's not heavy. I mean, it's heavier than it looks, but then I was like, oh no, I really care about this thing that I bought, and I would like to make sure it doesn't break, and to kind of just engineer this really weird long tail thing. It literally was this long tail on my bike, and I can't imagine how silly I must have looked to so many people who weren't expecting a bicycle to begin with, not to mention a crazy little clown bike like this Brompton, and, cherry on top or lightsaber on back. I have this 4-foot, 3-foot thing that's like this gigantic appendage that's sticking out the back of the rear rack. I must have been a sight. That's all I have to say. But you know what? If you are planning on going to do a bike tour and have a lightsaber or other long, slender thing, maybe a fishing pole, or maybe you're an architect and you're bicycling with your plans with you, yes, you can strap it to the rear of your Brompton, and it does all work out really well. So that was the ride that I really, really enjoyed, and to pair it up with the Disney part of the trip and the Star Wars stuff, it really was so much fun, and I hope that came across in the couple of episodes, and I just enjoyed the heck out of it. So, top 10 takeaways from the Kessel Run. All right, folks, next up on the show, announcing my very first spring bicycle tour of 2020. And I say a spring bicycle tour of 2020 because there's a decent possibility I might be able to sneak 2 in before spring ends, because spring goes until middle end of June. So I may actually be able to sneak another one in, since I'm able to do an early spring tour, but this one is really special. My next tour is The Missing Link, and I just think that this is kind of a natural tour for me to tackle. Let me tell you a little bit more about it. I'm going to be flying to Southern California with my Brompton for a piece of the California coast that I missed in 2014 as a part of my very favorite Pacific Coast tour. That tour I rode from Canada all the way to Mexico, but I had one small, teeny tiny piece of that Pacific Coast where I did a little bit of a deviation, and I want to explain why I did that. And basically the entire concept of this tour is to fill in that missing link, and that is a piece of the California coast from Anaheim to Oceanside, California, that I bypassed by train back in 2014. It's a really short link in an otherwise uninterrupted chain, and it is, like I said, it's the missing link. So the 2014 ride, if you weren't a part of the show all the way back then, I mean, we're going back to like episodes number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, if I'm not mistaken. Actually 5 and 6 were the 2 big episodes. I camped for the vast majority of that 6 weeks, all the way down the coast. And when I got to Southern California, there's a limited amount of camping. So for a variety of reasons, a dwindling budget, a reticence to deal with the question mark of Camp Pendleton, which we're going to get to in a second, I decided to bike inland a little bit away from the coast to get to Anaheim. There were cheaper hotels. There was basically cheaper lodging in that whole area. And because of the question marks around Camp Pendleton's access, Camp Pendleton is a Marine base in Southern California, if you're not familiar with it. I was like, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the train and skip past it, so I don't have to deal with the big question marks that were all around that. A little bit of backstory about Camp Pendleton. A Marine base, literally right there on the coast. It's in Orange County, just south of Los Angeles, but north of San Diego. And following 9/11, what used to be kind of like, hey, come on in, folks. Sure, bicycle along through our secure Marine base. It seems funny looking back on it, but after 9/11, of course, they decided to lock it down a lot more, in fact, and that has been the case ever since then. Now, what was really interesting is even in 2014, the systems were a really big question mark. There would be days when it would be like, okay, yeah, sure, come on in, bike straight through, stay single file, Semper Fi, In recent years, the issue with that is that not every day would they allow you to do that. So on any given day, you could bike up to the northern gate, because most of us come from north to south, but their offices are all down on the southern gate. So you get to the northern gate, and there'd be times when they would allow you through and times when they would turn you away. And at that point, I'd been cycling for weeks, and I was within a day or two's ride of finishing things off. I just didn't want to deal with that drama and that stuff. So combine that with, I did some extra miles. I biked inland. I'm going to grab the train in Anaheim. I just go to Oceanside. Boom, I'm set. All I'm doing is missing that little itty bitty piece of the California coast. Well, when you hop on a train after having biked the entire way to get to said train, and you're not cycling, and you look out and you see some of the most beautiful beach and shoreline you have ever seen in your life, like I did, you start to regret that a little bit. And so that's been kind of sticking in my head a little bit. Furthermore, things have changed with the whole Camp Pendleton situation. And I think I would say from a bicycling perspective, at least from a long distance bicycle tourist perspective, you could argue that it's gotten worse. They now have a rock solid system for access to Camp Pendleton. And that rock solid system is you have to go to the southern gate between certain office hours, bring your identification, prove who you are, all this other stuff, and they'll give you a permit. That's great if you're going northbound. But Very, very few people do. So local folks, they'll drive down there, they'll do this. You get a permit that's good for a year. Fantastic. Great for them. For someone like me, who's going to be coming from the north all the way through the south, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I suppose I could catch a ride, I could get a lift, I could rent a car, I could do all sorts of stuff, go down, drive down, go get my permit, drive back, figure all of that out, and then bicycle through. Or there is another alternative, and this was something that was available back in the day that I said no to because I wasn't comfortable with it. Now, I'm comfortable with it. It's not great, but I'm comfortable with it. And that is riding Interstate 5. Interstate 5 is a major north-south thoroughfare. You may have heard of it, of course, if you've been in the United States, but if you're from outside the States, this is one of the most busiest interstates that we have. These are our most major highway. It runs all the way up and down the Pacific coast. 6 miles. There is a 6-mile stretch which you are allowed to under state law to ride because I have no other opportunities because I'm prohibited from riding in Camp Pendleton because I don't have a permit. And so I'm going to ride Interstate 5 for 6 miles. The one nice thing that has happened in subsequent years is because of this setup and because more and more people are choosing to do this, the California Department of Transportation has done a couple of things that has really improved that stretch. Number one, it used to be a disaster in terms of having a bunch of junk and a bunch of glass, and it was just filthy, and it was really bad, and people were getting flats, and it was awful. They do a much better job. I am learning, of sweeping that up and making sure that it's nice and clean. The other thing that's really important there is that it's got an enormous shoulder. Interstates tend to have really wide shoulders for what it's worth. But of course, if cars are going really, really fast and one gets out of control, it's not a protected bike lane by any stretch of the imagination. That said, it is an enormously wide shoulder, wider than most. And so if I hug way over to the right, I feel like that with rumble strips and the other quasi-protective elements that are there, I think I'm comfortable doing it. It's about a half hour of riding on that part. And I believe that if where I intend to stop after the first day of riding, it's probably going to be early in the morning, and it's going to be going in a direction that may or maybe will have less traffic. I think that the bulk of the traffic will be going northbound. I'll be going southbound. My mileage may vary on that. I think I'm trying to convince myself that it'll be pretty quiet, but it'll be really interesting to see how it all goes. But I'm comfortable doing that now in a way that I wasn't back then. So that's it. That's the ride. I'm going to be trying to complete this bit right here. As I mentioned, I'm going to be riding my Brompton, and I'm going to be foregoing camping again. As I mentioned, camping was, back in 2014, not super abundant on the Los Angeles County side of things. South of there back then, it actually got pretty decent. There used to be a bunch of hiker-biker campsites in California state parks. Starting around Huntington Beach on South, there were at least 2 or 3. In recent years, the state of California has been removing them for a variety of reasons I'm not going to get into, but it's become more and more of a problem to be able to get good camping as a bicyclist along that part of the coast. So, for a secondary reason, it's just easier for me because of my travel situation and the time that I've got available for me to hop on a plane from a different part of the country that I'm going to be in, get there, and do this in a way where I don't have to think about camping gear, because that's a whole different animal. It's a whole different bunch of camping gear and traveling and stuff like that. I'm going to be actually in Nashville, Tennessee on a business trip. So I don't want to bring my camping gear with me on said business trip, but it's perfectly okay for me to bring my Brompton and my duffel, and I can fit all of my other stuff in there, and I think it should be all just fine. So I'm going to go directly from there to Southern California and all of that, and it's going to function really not a whole lot differently than how the Florida trip ended up working. So that's it. The missing link. I have to say, I never considered my 2014 ride to be incomplete in any way, shape, or form. We talked about this, Mysterious James and I, on one of those episodes that we did in the January month of Mysterious James about whether we're completists or not. I think I'm a little bit more of a completist than James is, but I never thought that the 2014 ride was anything but a complete through ride from Canada to Mexico. But I do have to say, this one little piece of the California coast is the only part that I didn't have wheels down. And now I get an opportunity to connect it. It's the missing link, and that's what the name of this tour is. And I'm really excited to bring you along. It's kind of a nice little throwback to a trip that meant an awful lot to me. And to be able to go back and revisit it is just really special. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to bring you along for the ride. Quick little bit of housekeeping. Because of the nature of this trip, I'm going to be ending up in a wonderful city, the city of San Diego, on Friday night, March 27th. I am potentially looking at doing a meetup. So that would be Friday night, March 27th, probably in the Gaslamp area of San Diego. If you are in Southern California, or if you happen to find yourself traveling there or whatever, and you're interested, I got my usual little form fill out thing over at pedalshift.net/San Diego. Go there if you're interested. No commitment necessary, of course. Just throw your name in. Also, if you've got an idea for a place for a meetup, and especially if you're from the area, I've got a couple of ideas. I know San Diego, about this much, but if there's a really, really good place, especially in the Gaslamp area, because I'm going to be staying relatively close there, that'd be awesome. Give me a heads up, and that way also folks who do express interest, I can send out details directly to you rather than to spam all of the lists and all of the podcasts and whatnot. But that would be, again, Friday night, March 27th. That would be the finish line for the missing link. So again, pedalshift.net/San Diego for those of you interested. Folks, that is the reveal. We will be doing a preview episode, and of course, we will be bringing all of the tour journals for the missing link in future episodes. I mention future episodes because this is part of the reveal of episode number 200. You may have noticed that the numbers of the show are getting tantalizingly close to 200. Episode 200 will end up being, as you probably have figured out by now, part 1 of the missing link tour journal. Considering that the earliest episodes of this show, episodes, like I said, number 5 and 6, I think, were the 2014 ride, I just can't think of a better way to celebrate episode 200 than by starting off the missing link ride and having that be a piece of it. I thought about doing, kind of a thing, remember episode number 100, we did an event in Portland, but I think that the heart of the show really is the bicycle tour. And when the episodes started leading in this direction and the tour opportunity came along, and I realized that they were converging at episode 200 being part 1, according to how my editorial calendar is shaping up right now, as part 1 of the missing link, I just thought it all ended up working out. So I am super excited that part 1 of the missing link pedal shift tour journals will be episode number 200. It's kind of fun, and it's kind of cool, and it's super full circle. Look for that in early April. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours like the Kessel Run and the Missing Link bike tours. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Buchan, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Scott Culbertson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latois Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Piroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grutke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Letko, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Kevin Olhausen, Robert Lackey, and new to the Society, Dominic Carroll. And thanks to all past and anonymous contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.